All right. Wonderful. It is time. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, our regular meeting, Thursday, December 8th. And I'm going to do the roll call. If you could confirm that you can see and hear me after I call your name. Commissioner Jekowitz.
Hello, here I can see and hear you.
Fantastic. Commissioner Cox. I'm not sure he's here yet. Commissioner Burns is not attending today. Commissioner Fair.
Present, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hughes.
Present, I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Ponce is also not attending. Commissioner Rubin.
I am here and I can see and hear you.
Fantastic. Commissioner Tolliver.
I'm present and I can see and hear you.
And I am Ernie Wong. I am the chair of the commission. We do have a quorum. In 2020, Governor Pritzker signed Public Act 101-0640, making certain amendments to the Open Meetings Act so that we, along with other boards and commissions, can continue to host virtual meetings during the COVID-19 public health emergency, provided that certain conditions are met. One of those conditions is that I, as head of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, determine that an in-person meeting of the Commission of Chicago Landmarks and its Permanent Review Committee are not practical or prudent. I want to make sure that our virtual meeting meets all the conditions of the Open Meetings Act as amended. Therefore, I'm making a determination pursuant to Section 7E2 of the Open Meetings Act that an in-person meeting of this Commission of Chicago Landmarks and its Permanent Review Committee is not practical or prudent. Similarly, I'm also making a determination pursuant to Section 7E5 that because of the disaster declared by the governor, it is unfeasible for at least one member of the Commission of Chicago Landmarks or its chief administrative officer or its chief legal officer to be physically present at the meeting place for either meeting, and so much for either meeting. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Commission of Chicago Landmarks on June 4th, 2020, regarding the chairman's emergency rule-making powers, I issued emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public commission meetings and provisions for remote public participation effective February 18th, 2022. These rules were posted on the Commission's website. In line with those emergency rules, today's regular Commission meeting is a virtual meeting being simulcast to the general public via live streaming. Commission meetings have been held virtually since May 2020. Meetings are structured to minimize the chances for technical difficulties. Members of the general public have been encouraged to submit written statements in advance of the meeting, and these have been posted on the Commission's website and are available for viewing during the virtual meeting at www.chicago.gov/CCL. Per the emergency rules, verbal statements by the general public for all agenda items will take place at the beginning of the meeting so that all those wishing to speak at today's meetings should be signed in to the Zoom meeting at this time. Before we hear staff presentations on the agenda items, after which we will ask to hear from owners or applicants and their teams, we'll open the floor up to members of the general public who wish to comment about the items to be heard in today's agenda. Comments should pertain only to the agenda items. Members of the public wishing to comment should use the raise hand function of Zoom to indicate that they wish to speak. Members of the public not connecting via computer or smartphone and instead phoning into the meeting should press *9 to activate the raise hand function and do the same to deactivate it. I or the meeting facilitator will call out the names one by one and unmute those people. Once unmuted, speakers should give their full name and organization, if any, they represent. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to speak. Once all members of the public wishing to make a comment have been given an opportunity to do so, we'll go through the agenda. I would ask that owners or applicants and their representatives, as well as aldermen, wait to speak until after the staff presentations have been made on their agenda item. We'll call on you then. Are there members of the general public who'd like to make comments about agenda item number 2, the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Greater Union Baptist Church at 1956 West Warren Boulevard? Vince, sir.
Chairman, we have 3 hands raised. The first one is Ward Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. The floor is yours. Ward, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was just unmuting. I was just given the key to unmute. You can hear me, obviously.
We sure can.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks. I'm Ward Miller, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We at Preservation Chicago fully support the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Greater Union Baptist Church, originally constructed by a Universalist congregation as the Church of the Redeemer and located at 1956 West Warren Boulevard on the Chicago Boulevard system. The Greater Union Baptist Church building has been a cornerstone of Chicago's Near West Side for generations and has endured many changes in the community over the past 136 years, including vast nearby urban renewal projects, social unrest following the death of Dr. King, along with the expansion of multiple nearby institutions. It's a testament to the long-term commitment of its leadership and congregation that Greater Union continues to service the community. Constructed in the Richardson Romanesque style, the building's high gables, rich colored red brick, ornamental terracotta, and sandstone gives the church a beautiful monochromatic palette and commanding presence. The organization of its principal facades, it's highly disciplined and embellished with a variety of arched openings, often containing highly decorative art glass windows by the Chicago firm of Macaulay and Miles. Its beautiful volumes are striking and seen from great distances. William LeBaron Jenney was the architect of Greater Union Baptist Church. Jenney experimented with metal framing, noting his experience in the American Civil War as a bridge engineer for the Union Army, and is recognized on the world stage as the father of the skyscraper, or metal frame building. That first skyscraper was known as the Home Insurance Building and located on Chicago's LaSalle Street, and designed by Jenney a year prior to Greater Union Baptist Church. In the years following the construction of the church, Jenney went on to design some of Chicago's tallest structures and recognized Chicago landmarks, including the Manhattan Building, the Ludington Building, Second Lighter, New York Life Building, among others. He also influenced a generation of architects in the design of their buildings around the world. Jenney's work and achievements are recognized as the beginning of the Chicago commercial style and the Chicago School of Architecture. Preservation Chicago has worked with the Greater Union Baptist Church, its board of directors, its pastors and congregation for over 5 years, actually closer to 7 years. And we are grateful to have captured many of the oral histories of the long-term members of the congregation and to assist with this preliminary landmark recommendation. We are grateful to the department, Pastor Dr. McCray, and members of the Greater Union Baptist Church for their help, commitment, dedication, and stewardship towards this important moment in our collective history. With that said, we fully support the designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We have a next speaker.
Next, we have Preservation Chicago.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Max Chavez, Director of Research and Special Projects at Preservation Chicago. And I would also like to speak in full support of granting official landmark status to Greater Union Baptist Church. If you've seen this church in person already, you know that it's already sort of an unofficial landmark on its own. It's one-of-a-kind facade and monumental massing, all of it decked out with really intricate brickwork and terracotta, are the product of one of the most important American architects of all time, working at the height of his powers around the same time that he would change the trajectory of the built environment forever through the advent of the skyscraper. Jenney's name would become synonymous with buildings that towered over city streets, but because of designs like Greater Union, he should also be remembered for his smaller scale works, which include residences as well as churches like this. They all exude beauty through painstaking attention to detail and materials, and they're an important part of his legacy, with Greater Union being maybe Jenney's finest underappreciated moment in Chicago architecture until today. Although the interior is likely not going to be included in this designation, it should be noted that the upper floor auditorium is a really magnificent space, and it's been lovingly maintained and kept in nearly original condition by the congregation of Greater Union Baptist Church. Noting this maintenance brings me to kind of want to sing the praises of the church's history as a community center and the congregation that makes this place so worthy of landmark status. Recently, I and Mary Lou Seidel, our Director of Community Outreach, sat down with congregants at Greater Union to hear stories about their lives at Greater Union, and many of them having attended the church for all or nearly all of their lives, as much as 3/4 of a century in some cases. And the running theme here through all of their stories was the really central role that the church played in their lives, serving as the backdrop for their family's most important memories, their own formative childhood memories, and even as a place of solace or comfort when times were rough. Their stories are just as much a part of the story of Greater Union as William LeBaron Jenney or the original congregation for whom this church was built. And we were really honored to be able to sit and hear it. Of course, monumental architecture and significant histories are really crucial parts of why we landmark buildings, but these smaller stories of love and personal importance really shouldn't be overlooked. Our city is filled with these local, unofficial neighborhood landmarks, and we can't afford to lose their stories through demolition or neglect because they aren't all William LeBaron Jenney buildings. But we're really elated to see this important community hub be considered for landmark status, because it really exemplifies everything that's important about our city's buildings, especially the values that they hold in communities of color. So thank you so much to everybody who's been involved in bringing the church to this stage in the landmarking process. And again, a special thanks to Pastor McCray and the members of Greater Union that spoke with us about why their church matters. We're looking forward to an eventual landmark designation, which would really confirm what the members of Greater Union have known for decades and shared with us, that their church is really an important part of the story of Chicago. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Before we go on to the next speaker, I'd like to note that Commissioner Cox has joined us, and for the record, thanks so much. And we have the next speaker.
Next speaker is Mary Lou Seidel.
Great. Mary Lou,
Hi, can you hear me?
we sure can.
Thanks. I just want to echo what Max said. Speaking to the congregation and its history, this is a church that survived the upheaval of the 60s and the raids and the pillaging and the disinvestment. It survived the sea of parking lots of the United Center. It is a congregation of extraordinary community and culture and history. And I just want to say, and I hope Reverend Dr. McCray is on the call, but in memory of Deacon Ray Brown, who every single person I interviewed mentioned as an extraordinary figure in their life, this place was a hub of community and love and support. So thank you. It's a great place. And
Thank you.
forgot to say I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Preservation Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Is that all of the speakers that have signed up for this item?
We have Ron Atchley's.
Okay.
Hi,
Ron?
I'm Rolf Achilles.
Oh, Ralph.
Rolf,
Yes.
ROLF, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not affiliated with any specific group. I'm a professor emeritus at the School of the Art Institute, but for many, many years, starting in the late 1980s, I've been keeping track of sacred spaces in Chicago, and I have a website that lists hundreds of them. And this church, this particular one, the Greater Union Baptist Church, is very significant for its stained glass windows. Many years ago, I put the exhibit together at Navy Pier on stained glass windows. And we had an example of Macaulay and Miles windows, and they were a Chicago firm that is well represented. They did the windows at the Greater Union Baptist Church, but that's their only really well-represented place. They've also done windows at Second Presbyterian Church, which is known. But Macaulay and Miles is a company that begins in 1872 and then fizzles out by 1914. It's extremely rare in Chicago sacred spaces to know who made their windows. And you can see the windows from the outside. They're, of course, much better seen from the inside, but a landmark designation of the building from the outside would preserve the windows. And I'm all for preserving the Macaulay and Miles windows. They're spectacular, large windows from a time in Chicago when we really don't know much about the stained glass industry in Chicago. There were 9 to 10 studios active here. Everybody knows New York studios. We know other studios in other cities, but the Chicago studios, other than Healy and Malay, are not well represented in the common knowledge of Chicago. And Greater Union Baptist Church has superb windows. They've been identified. And I think just for that, other than that it's a Jenny building and that it's an amazing sacred space inside and outside, it should be preserved and become and designated a landmark status. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Achilles. Is there anybody else who signed up to speak on this item?
I don't see any hand raised, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are there members of the general public who'd like to comment on agenda item number 3, the report from the Department of Planning and Development and final landmark recommendation for the Pioneer Arcade at 1535 North Pulaski Road? Nobody signed up.
We have Mr. Ward Miller.
Mr. Miller, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon once again, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. For the record, I'm Ward Miller, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We at Preservation Chicago fully support the Chicago Landmark designation and final landmark recommendation for the Pioneer Arcade building located at 1535 to 1545 North Pulaski Road in Chicago. The Pioneer Arcade building, along with the new Apollo Theater located directly across the street, were both recognized as part of our Preservation Chicago annual Chicago 7 Most Endangered Buildings program in 2015. These two structures, along with the Pioneer Bank, located a half a block to the north on the corner of Pulaski and North Avenue, also designated landmark, were anchor buildings to this important commercial intersection and shopping district in the West Humboldt Park community of Chicago. Unfortunately, over time, this area has suffered from severe disinvestment. The Pioneer Arcade building is a highly decorative, cream-colored terracotta building in a Spanish Revival style and designed by noted architect Jens J. Jensen. It's also a fine example of a recreational hall building type featuring bowling alleys and billiards and dating to 1925, and perhaps the best of them. Over many years, we have worked with the current owner, Hispanic Housing, and its director, Paul Roldan, the North Pulaski Historical Society and its members towards a good preservation outcome and reuse for this special building. We are hopeful that this designation and this new use for the Pioneer Arcade building will engage many of its significant features, including a full restoration of the building's elaborate terracotta facade. We are of the opinion that the proposed reuse of the historic Pioneer Arcade building and a Chicago landmark designation of the structure is an excellent outcome. We look forward to the owner, developer, and City of Chicago working together towards a beautiful and architecturally compatible addition to the rear sections of the building, while also integrating significant historic interior features of the building into the reuse plans. We therefore at Preservation Chicago fully support the final landmark recommendation and Chicago landmark designation for the Pioneer Arcade building. Thank you so much to the department and all of the people that have worked together tirelessly over the last number of years to make this a successful project. We are grateful that one of our Chicago 7 most endangered buildings from 2015 is now going into the landmarks process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ward. Is there anybody else who is speaking on this item?
I don't see any other hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I believe that's all the members of the general public who've indicated they wish to speak on the agenda items. Therefore, this concludes the public comment portion of the meeting. I want to go on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, our regular meeting of November 3rd. You've had those within your package. If there are no other comments, I'd like to request a motion to approve those minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved by Commissioner Cox, just
Thank
noting
you.
that I joined the meeting during the public comment session.
Great, thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner
Second,
Hayes.
thank you. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Jekowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver,
Yes.
And I am a yes, minutes are approved. Let's go on to the item number 2, the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Greater Union Baptist Church in the 27th Ward. This is located at 1956 West Warren Boulevard. And Mr. Crawford, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Wong. Commissioners, for your consideration today is a preliminary landmark recommendation for the Greater Union Baptist Church at Warren and Damon on the near west side. This building is 136 years old. It was designed by nationally significant architect William LeBaron Jenney. It was built in 1886 by a progressive.
Matt, I'm sorry, this is tech support. If you're sharing your screen, okay, now we're starting.
Here we go.
Okay.
So there it is. So this is at Warren and Damon. It's now known as Greater Union Baptist Church. It's 136 years old. It was built in 1886 by a progressive Unitarian congregation who worshiped and hosted cultural events here for 4 decades. In 1928, the church was bought by a Black Baptist congregation who rechristened it Greater Union. For the past 94 years, this congregation has maintained the building not just as a work of architecture, but also as a place of worship, community, and culture. The congregation, led by Pastor Reverend Dr. Walter McCray, is requesting landmark designation. In the preliminary summary of information which you received, there were oral histories from 12 current and former members of the congregation and Pastor McCray, who testified about their experiences of Greater Union as living heritage. I want to thank those that provided the valuable testimony, as well as Preservation Chicago, who conducted the interviews and transcribed the audio for your report. Next slide, please. The church is located at Damon and Warren on the near west side. The address is 1956 West Warren Boulevard. We think the building meets 4 criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criterion 1 for its heritage values, particularly aspects of society and culture in Chicago. The building that houses Greater Union traces its origins back to a Universalist congregation known as the Church of the Redeemer that was established on the near west side in 1856. The congregation began to meet in this building, the West Market Hall, a municipal market which stood in Randolph Street near Halsted. During the Civil War, the pastor and 40 men of the congregation volunteered to serve in the Union Army to end slavery. So too did the architect for the congregation's later building. And this is it. By 1886, the congregation at the Church of the Redeemer had grown sufficiently and raised funds to build the present brick church. From its dedication in 1886, the original congregation worshiped in the building for 42 years. In addition to worship, the Church of the Redeemer provided charitable aid to the community and hosted lectures that reflected progressive era concerns, such as temperance, women's right to vote, confronting racial division, and the welfare of children. Between 1914 and 1917, the Church of the Redeemer hosted a series of weekly lectures known as the West Side People's Forum, which is part of a national initiative known as the Open Forum Movement. That movement centered on public lectures to create a more informed and democratic public. Topics at the West Side People's Forum range from ways to end World War I, women's and immigrants' rights, confronting racism, municipal government reform, and the role of market capitalism. Speakers were important figures of their day, including Black civil rights activist Mary Church Terrell, who founded the National Association of Colored Women, member of British Parliament Samuel Ratcliffe, social reformer Grace Abbott, director of the Immigrants Protective League, and Black scholar W.E.B. Du Bois. In 1928, the church entered its second and current chapter when it was purchased by a Black Baptist congregation and rechristened as the Greater Union Baptist Church, a transition recorded on a granite plaque on the facade. This congregation has for nearly a century maintained this building as a spiritual, social, and cultural home on the near west side, one of the city's oldest Black communities. Greater Union Baptist Church has been shepherded by pastors and members of the congregation who have contributed to the social and cultural well-being of the near west side through social programs for young people, charitable outreach, and fellowship. In addition, the congregation at Greater Union Baptist Church has engaged in the civil rights movement through support of the NAACP, the Chicago Urban League, and other non-religious political organizations. In addition to the heritage criterion, we also believe the building meets criterion 3 for its association with two energetic pastors who were and are contributors to the culture of the city. First, there was Reverend Shelbia Hamilton Graham, pastor from 1947 to 1967, who used his pulpit at Greater Union to support the spiritual needs of his congregation, as well as the social needs of the African-American community in Chicago at large. During the civil rights movement, Reverend Graham was active in the NAACP. He aided victims of the 16th Street church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama, and opposed discrimination and overcrowding in public schools in Chicago and in the South. And two, there is Reverend Dr. Walter A. McCray, who served as pastor at Greater Union from 1996 until 2002, and who returned to the pulpit in 2018, where he continues to serve. Dr. McCray has increased Greater Union Baptist Church's community outreach and charitable programs. He is also a nationally recognized biblical scholar who has published and lectured about scripture from an Afrocentric perspective. In addition to these heritage values and these significant people, we believe the building also meets criterion 4 for architecture. Greater Union is a massively scaled and well-proportioned brick church with distinct terracotta details. The design reflects the Romanesque revival with its heaviness, its deeply set round arched windows, its porticoed entrances, eyebrow dormers, and ornament derived from natural forms. But what makes Greater Union stand out are the refinements of its architect, William LaGarde Jenney, who articulated his design philosophy in print throughout his career. Jenney's fingerprints at Greater Union include the building's taut wall surfaces with ornament that is incorporated into the wall structure rather than applied to it. And his use of the diaper pattern, small repeated geometrical motifs set adjacent to one another, form of decoration that Jenney borrowed from medieval architecture and medieval manuscripts. Jenney was also unusual in his day for using a monochrome palette, used to great effect at Greater Union. Dark red brick, red sandstone, and terracotta are left unglazed and uncoated to display their natural color of these materials. Finally, Jenney's imprint stands in the single large gable on each facade that reflects his preference for the use of fewer elements at large scale rather than repeating forms at smaller scale. This is the auditorium at Greater Union, which is located on the second floor. Soaring worship space features massive hammer beam trusses built up of laminated timber, another trademark of the building's architect. Varnished southern pine clad ceiling. Curved pews arranged on a sloped floor face the raised chancel, which is reserved for the choir, pulpit, baptistry, and organ. Professor Achilles has talked a bit about the glass in the public testimony, and it's remarkable. Each transept of the church features dazzling opalescent stained glass windows designed by the Chicago studio of Napoleon Miles, including this depiction of the New Testament parable of the sower. The image itself is based on an 1850 painting by Jean-Francois Millet. And there is this allegory of charity represented as a mother caring for her children. And finally, in the south transept, there's this This depiction of the Madonna holding the child Christ, itself based on a 1514 painting by Raphael. These three windows were commissioned by members of the original Redeemer congregation as memorials for deceased loved ones. Greater Union was designed by Jenny, an architect who clearly meets criterion number 5. As has been stated, Jenny achieved national significance for the development of the first metal framed skyscraper in Chicago, the Home Insurance Building of 1885, shown here. He also developed a design philosophy that helped clear the way for progressive architecture to flourish in Chicago in the late 19th century, including the Chicago and Prairie schools. While he designed a range of building types, it is for his commercial buildings that Jenny is remembered and lauded. Most of these were built in Chicago after the Great Fire, when Jenny became a leading architect in rebuilding the city in the 1890s. 4 of these survive, and they're all landmarked: the Second Leiter Building, the Ludington Building, the Manhattan Building, and the New York Life. During his long career, in addition to Greater Union Baptist Church, Jenny designed these other 3 church buildings, of which just 2 survive. Of these, Greater Union is by far the most intact with respect to Jenny's original design. In addition to the landmark criteria just discussed, staff believes that Greater Union also meets the separate integrity criterion. This comparison of a 1901 and current photo shows the church retains superb integrity, especially considering that for most of its 136-year history, it has served a community that has endured economic disinvestment. Credit for the building's fine integrity is due to the current congregation who has maintained the fabric for 94 years. One aspect of integrity is setting, which has changed dramatically. Here is another comparison that shows how the neighborhood around the building has changed due to the construction of United Center and its associated parking lots. The residential neighborhood that formed the context and housed the congregants has been diminished. Greater Union Baptist Church is thus a rare survivor, which argues further for its preservation. So in conclusion, I want to acknowledge that Pastor Reverend Dr. McCray and his congregation have requested landmark designation, and representatives are in attendance. Again, thanks to Preservation Chicago and the members of the congregation who provided the oral histories for the designation report. It was very valuable testimony for us. The church is located in the 27th Ward, and Alderman Burnett is in support of designation. And staff then recommends that the significant historical and architectural features of the building be preliminarily identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the building. And you have a preliminary landmark recommendation to that effect. I'm here to answer any questions that you have, and I'm sure that Pastor McCray would like to make a statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Does the commission have any questions for Matt at this time? No hands are raised. Reverend Dr. McCray, would you like to make a statement, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. Amen. And to members of the commission.
Thank you, sir.
And like to do a shout out to Preservation Chicago, Ward Miller, Executive Director, and Mary Lou Seidel, Director of Community Engagement, and her assistant who did the oral interviews. And then of the Historic Preservation Division of Chicago Department of Planning and Development, Daniel Kleiber, Matt Crawford, and Patrick Piska, the photographer principal for the city of Chicago. Here I represent Greater Union Baptist Church as pastor, represent our deacons, our trustees, our team members, some of which are on the line, and our entire congregation. Here's my statement. Brothers and sisters, down through the years, core traditions of Greater Union Baptist Church have been good preaching, good music, good teaching, good fellowship, and good food. We believe that we must seek to maintain these core traditions. We also must maintain the witness of the church as she radiates to impact our community. The church must change to meet and serve a new demographic and yet remain faithful to God. That's what we endeavor to do with a great desire. At this season, there's a juxtaposition of the building receiving landmark status alongside the spiritual status inherited by the church. These two movements dovetail at this time, and this marks, I believe, a great thing that's taking place in our city. Students of culture and religion, or culture and the Christian faith, let us know that the highest values of a people's culture are expressed in their religious or spiritual or Christian practices. As an African descended people, being joined in community is very important. Historically, we were separated from the motherland of Africa and brought here to America as enslaved people. That's why community is so important to us. On the urban local scene, the history reports that in the geographical area of the church, there was a tremendous African-American culture and corridor. Folks who came from the South in the Great Migration ended up on the South side of Chicago, and here on the West side as well. As stated in the report, we highlight the words of Dr. Christopher Reed. It's a very good report, commended to your reading. Matlock did a very good job. As the first century of settlement, Dr. Reed says, as the first century of settlement came to an end, the church stood proudly as a fortress against the pressures of urban decay. If the scene along Damon Avenue, south of where it intersected Lake Street, signified anything, it was this formidability, both spiritual and physical. Church after church rose as parapets along Damon Avenue. Greater Union Baptist, Gammon Memorial, Methodist Episcopal, St. Stephen African Methodist Episcopal, Friendship Baptist, and St. Andrew Episcopal. The only church of those five that remains in the area is Greater Union. There once was a time in African-American history that all our people possessed was essentially the community of the church. The church was the hub of the Black experience. Everything that took place in the African-American community was rooted in the congregation of faith in our churches. People of God needed a place to congregate. And I can say, oh, hallelujah. The elders and ancestors of Greater Union Baptist Church had a vision. Those old folks with their quarters and dimes, they had a vision. They sought to possess the building on Damon and Warren as a gathering place, and they sacrificed themselves in order to purchase and pay off the facility. It is a great thing that the city of Chicago would make a move to preserve our building. On the one hand, to preserve it because it was built by the father of skyscrapers, Jenny, in Chicago. The other side of the coin is that our place of worship and community represents the sacred and protective place of a congregation of a people of God. A people of God who have held to the highest values of an African descended people in the expressions of our Christian faith. Thus, it becomes vitally important, even within the midst of all the changes occurring around the church, to make every effort to preserve not just the physical structure, but to preserve the symbolic core traditions of this place. It is an actual meeting place of a Black people who brought a true spiritual presence to our geographic community. This is the importance of this landmark status. The motivations are different but complementary. Those of the city are looking predominantly at one thing. They love historic architecture and want to preserve what remains. On the other hand, those who love to worship and to serve the true and living God, and to love to cohesively preserve a people in their God-rooted identity and community, they have a blessed and high value. Both these motivations, which are two sides of a single coin, are able to work together for the benefit of all in this opportune season. Peace be unto you.
Thank you, Pastor McRae. Does the commission have any questions for Pastor McRae? And good to see your hands. Commissioner Cox.
Hi, thank you, Chairman Wong, and thank you, Dr. McRae. I did want to, just say a few things, but I also have some, practical questions. Thank you, first and foremost, for being such a, an incredible steward of Greater Union. I was really intrigued by your tenure with the congregation, and it really does speak to, I guess, a calling you have to be the steward of that congregation, but also of that building. So I'm always thrilled when I see African-American faith leaders understanding that their buildings are as much a part of their stewardship as the congregations that are members. And I often think, and particularly in the case of Greater Union, these buildings are often like the last buildings standing. I mean, they're like silent witnesses that have watched the change around them, and yet they stand. They're still there, and part of their ability to remain standing is folks like yourself and your congregation that declare that they will be here through this historic designation status. They will be here for decades, if not centuries to come. So I can't thank you enough for the role that you've taken to step forward, and hopefully this will be the beginning of additional resources that flow and acknowledge your stewardship. So this is a first step, which I hope will be a step to lift up this icon, this neighborhood icon in the future. So I'm thrilled, as I said, and your context of talking about the churches that we did lose makes it all the more important, the work that you're doing. I still always wonder about these urban congregations that have lost the neighborhood around them, because people used to walk to church, and now there's no neighborhood around them, or it's been diminished. So I have to assume that a lot of your congregants come by car and or maybe they take public transit. So it's not clear to me. How's the congregation doing relative to its stability? Is it, holding its own, or is it, with COVID, it is kind of decreased? Are you now more virtual than you are in person? Where do people park in terms of your, so I don't have a sense of the land holding that you have. So I'm mostly concerned about the ongoing health of the congregation, and we will preserve the building. That seems to be in the makings, but I want to make sure that we preserve the congregation and that it is thriving as you preserve the building itself. So that was a lot of stuff in there, but I really would like to hear how's it going, what's the status of the congregation, and whatever else you'd like to share in that regard.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Appreciate your gratefulness and your insightful questions. Greater Union, we are in the mode of preservation and restoration, parenthetically as a congregation. Many of our members, our demographic is much older, senior. Okay, we must rebuild the congregation. We have some great faithful persons, amen, of this congregation, and some are still alive who know the old history of the congregation, and so they have the vision of which to build on. We at this time are more virtual than we are in person. The reason being is because our heating plant, one of our heating plants went out, our HVAC, and we ordered the part over a year ago, but it's been trouble trying to get the part because of the supply chain problems to come in. And that is the only reason why we are not in person at this time, but in virtual. Yet we've maintained our witness, and we've made arrangements when members have passed and died, you know, to take care of them properly. There. As far as the community is concerned, very interesting. Yeah, folk used to walk to the church. One of our members used to live right next door to the church, okay, which they sold their land to the United Center. The land of the church is the footprint of the present edifice, as well as a lot across the alley on Washington Boulevard. All right, we park, we have a covenant agreement. This was made under under IOP, the Interfaith Organizing Project. Dr. Arthur Griffin, my pastor of First Baptist Congregational Church, which is a landmark. And the community churches got together and made a covenant agreement with the United Center. And therefore, we have 100 spaces that are allocated to us in the United Center parking lot adjacent to the congregation.
Okay.
At this time, most of our people come from the outside, but however, there is a large community, all right? The housing projects, Henry Horner, were torn down, and then low-rise were built. And so you're talking about virtually for almost a mile, all right, on one side of Damon and on the other side of Damon going west. There are hundreds of thousands of folk who live in the area. And this is, to me, our targeted ministry, along the virtual and the hybrid thing that the churches must do today following COVID-19, all right? So we have the potential of great ministry, all right, right there in the community. So I've tried to touch on a number of the things that you—
Yeah, no, that's extremely helpful. I think your arrangement with United Center, so that you will always be able to have a parking reserve, even if you don't own the land. That was brilliant. I'm glad the churches got together, and that you do see the potential of the residential community around the church as a part of your future growth and evolution. So thank you.
There's a changing demographic, obviously, in the area. And we getting feelers all the time for people who live within a block or two of the congregation.
Right.
When are you all going to open back up? And I want to come, or we want to come.
Right.
So you're going to see a mixture coming together, we believe.
Right. All right.
Maintain our—
Yeah, thank you very much. I will concede the rest of my time to my colleagues here who also have questions for you, but thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fair.
Thanks. I'll be pretty brief. I'd echo just some of the same comments and praise that Commissioner Cox shared. Really what stood out to me about this was just really kind of the interviews that came through. So kudos to the staff, Preservation Chicago team, and to you, Dr. McCray, as well, just for that testimony that really helped identify the fact that this building is not only notable for its architecture, but really what it means as a beacon to, the community. So, also just echoing, some of the last points that Commissioner Cox mentioned is, about continuing the growth and making sure, the congregation scales with the long-term planning. It's an amazing facility that you have. And I think I saw even online that there were, ministry through sewing and other activities and programming that happens, at the church. So just really excited for how that evolves along with it and with the neighborhood. So kudos to everyone on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Fair. Commissioner Hughes.
You're muted.
You're muted, Commissioner Hughes. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. I too just want to give praise and flowers to Pastor McCray and the congregation. This one was a little personal for me because I can relate to the testimony that you gave about the church and faith kind of serving as the anchor of Black communities. I grew up in a very similar community that no longer exists now in St. Louis, that in a lot of cases in terms, the church was sort of the only community asset that we had. And so the fact that now, we get to play a role in saving structures like this in other communities so that they're not wiped away and that history doesn't get erased is something that I wholeheartedly stand behind. I did have a quick question for you, which is, it sounds like the HVAC is on the horizon. Are there any other future projects on the horizon for the structure? The interior looks immaculate. Is there any other projects that you guys foresee in the near future?
Well, we want to, of course, do the HVAC. We want to clean the place, making it ready after not being there for so long. We would like to do some interior things in the congregation. For instance, we'd like to have a ramp on the outside, become disability accessible, but that would also mean that we'd have to raise a floor on the lower level on the inside, do that. We have certain systems, of course, that need to be upgraded, primarily the electrical system, okay, that we want to do, and like that on the inside. Of course, the outside needs some things, some tuck pointing, some good roof there, a few other things. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely mentioned that to say, there's resources available, especially once you guys gain landmark status, that you guys can take advantage of to get the funding support that you need for those projects.
Thank you. Yes, we want to work with those funding sources very closely.
And also leverage the United Center as much as possible.
I guess so.
Once you get the status, we can work on that, right? Commissioner Tolliver.
I actually follow-up comment on the question that Commissioner Cox asked about the demographics of the congregation and future growth. There are resources that can help churches strategically look at these issues. For example, there's census data that's available that lets you know the demographics within a mile, 5 miles, whatever radius you want of the church. But it also goes into who would most likely come to that church. Yeah. You can't just assume because there are 100,000 people within a mile, any of them are looking for a church. And if they are, what kind of church they're looking for. We've gotten that data here in Washington Park at St. Edmunds and The
Yes.
data showed where people are most likely to want to join the Episcopal Church, Hyde Park suburbs. So that then leads you to, as we did, we have consultant who helps them come in and do a SWOT analysis. That to look at where your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats are. And then from that, you put together a plan to go after whatever population you target. Absent that kind of strategic planning, and look at your resources, what can you do within your resource base to even achieve any of it? Absent that kind of strategic thinking, just saying we're here, the doors are open, the field is wide, doesn't bring new people in.
Yes.
The last thing I'd like to say, and there was an organization named Inspired Partnerships, as Ward well knows, because that's how we met a few decades ago, when they did a physical, brought in a resource to do a physical plant analysis of our church plant. And we had a strategic plan that looked at every part of the building, and then developed a plan about it. So just looking at electricity in isolation, looking at HVAC in isolation without a holistic survey of what the physical plant needs are, is just patchwork. So perhaps, Preservation Chicago, in addition to, since they're very concerned about church buildings, and I know the capacity is there, and its CEO can help institutions like you look at the bigger picture of how you preserve the institution, not just the building.
Yeah, I would concur, Commissioner Tolliver. My druthers would be to have it come in and look at what's the church house look like.
It does a disservice not to do both, because the congregations die, the demographic will be gone. I'm a bank director. We don't loan money to churches because we're looking at for the most part anymore, because we look at the demographic. Who's going to pay the mortgage in 15 years when everybody in there is over 75?
Yes. I would like to see things done for the next at least 30 years. What the physical plant look like and what the congregation must look like 30 years down the road. That would be my brothers.
All right. Commissioner Cox.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know, again, this has been really, we always get really good conversations as churches on the South and West Side step forward, because the greater needs beyond the bricks and mortar become very obvious to everyone, including the leadership of the church. But we don't actually have a lot of standing structures to address the larger set of issues that are going to support the church in a long time. So if it is, I like Commissioner Tolliver's notion that perhaps this is an opportunity for cultural preservation and the preservation of people to do a partnership with Preservation Chicago. I have a feeling we would find an opportunity. There would be all kinds of resources that could be, whether it's philanthropic or there are foundations that exclusively support religious institutions, faith-based institutions. So a lot of times we get tripped up in, faith-based versus, nonprofit, and what foundations will and will not support. There are foundations set up specifically for the types of things we're talking about. It's just that they would need a proposal and they would need a partnership. So I don't see Preservation Chicago on the screen, but I know they're out there. And if they really would like to dig a little deeper, given the suggestions we've heard, the planning department is maybe not positioned to be able to be the manager of such an initiative, but we certainly could be a facilitator of bringing those partners together and be supportive. I really would like us to tackle this, because every time we succeed in getting a congregation to preserve, to landmark their building, the same issues are coming up. I mean, I think as long as I've been on here and everyone, the same issue that you're raising, Commissioner Tolliver, is at the core. How do we grow their congregations again? And how do they move with the times? And I think they need additional resources to do that. And I think the first step, and just thank you again, Pastor, for bringing this, because the fact that you are willing to landmark your building is putting this issue solidly on our radar. And without your effort to preserve the bricks and mortar, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So again, I think this is a natural progression of let's save the bricks and mortar, but more importantly, let's save the congregation that lives in those buildings. So I think we will try. I will talk to our staff. I'll talk to a number of the commissioners who have expressed an interest in there, and we will try to follow up with something.
Yes, okay. And Preservation Chicago has been very kind.
I know they've been amazing, as has Matt, who put together an amazing report. I know it was a collaborative effort with Preservation Chicago, but I just wanted to give Matt a shout out. Just excellent, excellent, excellent work.
Well, thank you all. This has been an incredible discussion. If there is no further comments, I would like to request a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Greater Union Baptist Church. Is there a motion?
So moved, Commissioner Hughes.
Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Fair.
All right, let's do the roll call. Commissioner Drekowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver,
Yes,
and I'm an enthusiastic yes. The commission, the motion carries unanimously, and we look forward to the next steps. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very
let's
much.
go to
Thank you.
Absolutely. The next item on the agenda. Oops, I got a few pages mixed up here. Is a report from the Department of Planning and Development and final landmark recommendation for the Pioneer Arcade located at 1535 North Pulaski Road in the 26th Ward. And Commissioner Cox, I think you're giving this presentation.
Yeah, actually, I'm happy to do the report on the Pioneer Arcade building at 1535 North Pulaski Road. Completed in 1925, the Pioneer Arcade was designed by Danish-born Chicago architect Jens J. Jensen for Greek-born entrepreneurs Gus Regas, Spiros Regas, and Peter Deniglis. This Spanish Baroque Revival style structure, conceived as an elaborate entertainment and social center for Chicago's growing Humboldt Park community, is one of the last remaining large-scale commercial buildings that formed a neighborhood commercial center at the intersection of North Avenue and Pulaski Road. As one of Chicago's grandest urban sports hall, surviving from the 1920s, the Pioneer Arcade stands as an important illustration of the development of America's 20th century leisure culture embodied in the games of bowling and billiards. With its impressive ivory-colored terracotta facade, the Pioneer Arcade is the most ornate and intact example of Chicago commercial recreation center type that is still standing. The building is located in the 26th Ward and was rated orange in the Chicago Historic Surveys, Historic Resource Surveys. The property is one of 3 development sites included in Plan Development 1205, approved by City Council in 2012. A new 5-story building offering rental housing for seniors was completed in 2015 on the previously vacant corner lot at 3949 West North Avenue. This is north of the Pioneer Arcade by the Hispanic Housing Development Corporation. That's HHDC. HHDC has since been approved to develop the two remaining sites at 1535 North Pulaski Road and the vacant 100-foot wide site immediately to the south with additional housing for seniors. Site plan approval was granted in September 2022. HHDC recognizes the significance of the front portion of the Pioneer Arcade and has therefore consented to the proposed landmark designation. Invest Southwest is an unprecedented community development initiative to marshal the resources of multiple city departments, community organizations, and corporate and philanthropic partners towards 12 commercial corridors within 10 Invest Southwest community areas. Launched in October 2019, Invest Southwest's goal is to reactivate neighborhood cores that have historically served as focal points for pedestrian activity, for shopping, services, transportation, public spaces, and other quality of life amenities for local residents. The Pioneer Arcade is located within one of these 12 commercial corridors, the North Avenue commercial corridor in Humboldt Park community area. The initiative is providing support for small businesses, creating public realm improvements, restoring historic buildings, and fostering equity and resilience where it's needed most. In 2020, after a pretty robust community engagement process, Humboldt Park stakeholders worked with the city to craft and to issue RFPs for the development project at the northwest corner of Pulaski and North Avenue. They selected Team Pioneros to lead a $53.9 million project to rehabilitate the vacant landmark Pioneer Bank building with an entrepreneurial incubator space, a Latino cultural center, and office space. To the north, a new 75-unit affordable residential building will include offices for the Humboldt Park Family Health and a potential library branch. Just half a block south, the Pioneer Arcade is another major distinctive historic building of the North Avenue Commercial Corridor's key intersection. Landmark designation of this structure aligns with the strategies of Invest Southwest. Combined with its redevelopment, the proposed designation should lend a synergistic effect to the larger efforts already underway with Invest Southwest in the Humboldt Park community. Therefore, the Department of Planning and Development finds that the proposed landmark designation of the Pioneer Arcade at 1535 North Pulaski Road supports the city's overall planning goals for the surrounding Humboldt Park community area and the West Planning Region, and is consistent with the city's governing policies and plans. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Does the commission have any questions for Commissioner Cox at this time? Seeing none, Mr. Roldan, would you like to make a few comments?
Commissioner, Chairman, Mr. Roldan, I believe has been held up. My name is Steve Porras. I work for Mr. Roldan and Hispanic Housing Development Corporation. I'd be happy to substitute for him, although there's no substitute for Mr. Roldan, as people well know.
Steve, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks so much. You're very gracious. So as I'm very grateful as well as humbled and very prideful to be participating today, not only due to the efforts of Commissioner Cox and his staff, but also our development team. We're joined here today by Eric Roldan, no relation, project architect at Urban Works. This site is one that Hispanic Housing has been hoping to redevelop for some time, going all the way back to the planned development that Commissioner Cox cited and the development of the senior housing just to the north of the referenced site. Hispanic Housing, as people well know, is a 45-year-old organization dedicated to producing, running, and operating for the long term. We don't sell. Affordable rental housing for elderly and for families. And we see this as an integral part of that mission. We're very cognizant and very gratified to be a part of the North Avenue corridor of Invest Southwest Humboldt Park. We see this site in particular as adding a synergy to the city's efforts to redevelop the corridor. As people in the meeting well know, this is a transit-rich site, an amenity-rich location that we think will well serve the residents of this building, elderly residents, who, by the way, will benefit from a substantial investment by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and hopefully also investment by the City of Chicago, as well as the Illinois Housing Development Authority. So all of those commitments from IDA and from the city are yet to come, but we are working hard to make sure that they happen. And we see this designation or hopeful designation as an integral part of that overall effort. Again, we're very grateful for all the support that we've had from DPD and its staff. And we are open to any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Porras. Does the commission have any questions or comments for Mr. Porras? I did want to note this is an extremely ambitious project. It was ambitious with the first building on the corner, and I'm so excited to see this continuing along to incorporate not only this building, but also the lot south of it for much needed affordable housing for the city. This is really incredible, and really encourage that. Commissioner Cox, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I did want to convey our appreciation to your organization for the work you've done in this corridor. And I remember when we were trying to decide what would be the commercial corridors that would receive the investment and coordination through Invest Southwest. And we specifically looked for capacity on the ground, the organizations that were already in place, that already had projects in the pipeline, where we could add value and we could leverage. So we're on North Avenue because you were on North Avenue first. And it's so nice to see the same belief system, the same sense of ethics of why preserving the legacies that are still there. So we kind of thank your organization for offering to do the landmark designation. And I think we've, this one has been challenging, right? Because we're going to save the portion in the front and then juxtapose new building to the side and behind it. And this is exactly what we want to convey, that history is a continuum. We can coexist with history and expand it into the next generation. So again, the team you assembled together, I think have done a wonderful job, incredibly sensitive to the historic component. And so I'm really looking forward to it. And again, there's this momentum that's building around the corridor, and the Pioneer Arcade is going to be a critical piece of that. So again, just my congratulations to you and my appreciation for the organization taking this particular strategy.
Thank you for those kind remarks, Commissioner. We are very cognizant and aware of the overall efforts, the community that is taken to bring this project to this very point, knowing full well that there is still a fair amount of work yet to do. But yeah, we are more than ready to toil in the fields and get the work done. We are especially aware of the importance of, preserving history and preserving the architectural integrity that is part and parcel of the neighborhood. We are very grateful to have an excellent development team, Urban Works and Barra La Tosa, and all the engineers, architects, and a good general contractor. We know for sure that we can pull this off. So again, thank you very much for your department's support and the support of the commission.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, I'd like to call for a motion to accept the department's report and adopt the final landmark recommendation for the Pioneer Arcade at 1535 North Pulaski. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Tolliver moves as second.
Seconded, Commissioner Rubin.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubin. I'll do the roll. Commissioner Jekowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox,
Yes.
Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Enthusiastically, yes.
and I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Mr. Porras and Mr. Roldan, thank you very much for everything and good luck to you all.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the Permit Review Committee reports. And Commissioner Jekowitz, floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Chairman. The Permit Review Committee reviewed 8 projects at its November 3rd, 2022 meeting. All 8 projects were approved with conditions. The report summarizing the scope of the proposed projects and the committee's decisions was included in your packets. This report is for your information and for the record.
Thank you. 8 is a lot. Emily, your report, please.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. For the month of November, staff reviewed 146 permit applications. A total of 159 reviews were performed by staff, and the average number of days to issue approval or corrections was 4.
Wow, it's almost double of what I saw the month before. That's incredible. All right, announcements. The schedule for the 2023 Commission and Permit Review Committee meetings has been finalized. The dates will be posted on the Commission's website at chicago.gov/CCL. If you regularly attend, please see the schedules, since meetings are not always on the first Thursday of the month in order to avoid holiday conflicts and bunching up as much as possible. For instance, January's meeting will be held on Thursday, January 12th. And with no further business, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved, Commissioner
All right.
Hughes.
And a second?
Seconded, Commissioner Fair.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Commissioner Jekowitz, it's your call, sir.
Let's begin the Permit Review Committee meeting at 2:13.
All right. There you go. Have a great holiday and
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of the year, folks.
Happy holidays.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
same to you all.
Everybody.
Thank you.